Alright, how's it going everybody? So in today's video, I will not only be showing you an interesting method of creating a chain built along a curve using instancing, but I will also be giving a few pointers on how to fix a few things that might bug you as much as they bug me, right? Like this sort of stuff. I'll also be discussing how to append it over into other projects, as well as a few points to consider, whether you were just looking to create still renders within Blender or game assets. So, let's get after it. Alright, so first things first, we're going to hit Shift A, go to Mesh, and bring in a torus. Then I myself personally am going to open up this Add Torus menu, and I'm going to drop the major segments down to 16 and the minor down to 8. Not only because I like to work in the power of 2s, but also I just don't need all that geometry. So then I'm going to hit 7 on the number pad to go into top orthographic view, tab into edit mode. I'll hit Alt Z to activate X-ray mode, I believe. I'm going to box select this top half here, and then I'll hit E to extrude on the Y, hold Control, and just kind of drag this out until it looks more or less like a chain link. Tab back into object mode, hit Alt Z to come back out of X-ray mode. I'm going to hit right click and set origin to center of mass right there. And then I'll hit Shift S and selection to cursor. So that'll snap it right back to the world origin where our 3D cursor was at, right? This is going to be important, right? If your 3D cursor for any reason was like way the hell over here or something like that, floating off in space, just hit Shift C to snap it back to world origin and continue to build from there. Build from there, from the onset, preferably, because we are building this in a isolated blend file for a reason, as you will soon see. But anyway, now with that done, we'll hit S to scale, hold Control, and I'm just going to scale it down to like 0.1. You can scale it to whatever size is, relatively a believable chain link size, right? For whatever project you're going to end up using this in. So we'll scale it down to like that. I'm going to hit Control A and apply scale, because even though I wasn't getting the warning down here, just always get into the habit of doing that, because even if you're not getting the non-uniform scale warning at the bottom left down there, you will still very likely run into issues, be it with shading or whatever else. Just always get into the habit of applying your scale. Now I'm going to hit Shift A, bring in a plane. And this part, you could probably leave it like this effing big. Probably doesn't matter, but I'm going to hit S to scale, and I'm going to bring it down, something like this. Scale it back out on the Y, like one click like that. Scale it in on the X. Just till it's a little bit, overlapped, a little bit larger on either side, Hit Control A and apply scale once more. Now over here in our outliner, I'm going to click and drag with our torus here. So I'm dragging the torus object around. I'm going to mouse over the plane and hold Shift. And you can see there, hopefully you can see it, it says drop to set parent. So if we let go of left click over the plane, it's going to parent that torus to the plane. I'm going to open up this little drop down. There you see it. And I'm going to go ahead and hide the torus. Then with our plane selected, I'm going to come over here to the Object Properties tab, scroll down to Instancing, and switch to Faces. What? No way, dude. That's pretty cool, all right? Show Instancer right here. I'm going to turn off Viewport and Render, so it hides the plane, right? The instancer is our plane, and the thing that we are instancing is the child object, the torus. Why it exactly works that way, I can't really explain that to you, but it does. Just trust me. So we're going to hide that because we don't want the plane. We want the object it is instancing. In this case, our torus, our chain link. So then I'll hit Shift A and go to empty, bring in a plane axes here. I'm going to bring this forward on the Y like so, right about here. I'm going to hit S to scale and hold Control and just kind of bring it down something like this so it takes up a little bit less real estate there. And hell, you could even apply the scale for the fun of it. And then now with our, well, technically not the torus. If you click it, you're clicking what appears to be the torus object, but we're actually selecting the plane, which is why it's good to hide the torus object. Because see, now I click right there and we've actually selected the torus and not the plane. And I'd have to like kind of double click to get the plane there. So I just hide the torus. We don't want that. We want to do the rest of this work entirely on the plane. So we'll go over here to our modifiers tab, add, generate, array. I'm going to drop the count down to 2 because we don't need any more than that, and switch shape from line to transform. And then change this right here. I'll drag this out a little bit more so you can see. Transform reference, switch from inputs to object. And for transform object, select this eyedropper tool and select your plane axes. You could also just use the, you could select this and, there's not much going on in the scene. You could do it that way too. Rotate with the, excuse me, I almost messed that up myself. Select the plane axes and rotate it on the Y, 90 degrees like so. You can bring it forward on the Y. It's all kind of links in together, right? In a believable fashion. It could be a little closer. Not a big deal. It doesn't matter. Then in object mode, we should be in object mode anyway. Hold Shift A and we're going to bring in a Bezier curve, right? Because even if you want your chain to be taut, right? Like say it's hanging from a chandelier, or a chandelier is hanging from the chain rather, that chain is going to be along a straight line, more or less, nice and taut, right? So even if you want that, it's good to have the way that we're setting this up is for versatility, right? So that you can use it in a variety of use cases. So just having this setup is good. Whether you plan to actually give it some curvatures or not, doesn't matter. You should still do it like this because then you have something you can use in a lot of different instances. So with the Bezier curve selected, I'll rotate along the Z 90 degrees. Tab into edit mode, and by default all Bezier curves come with 2 handles, right? And one of them is always skewed off about 45 degrees. So I'm going to select that one, hit V, and I'm going to switch to vector, then V again, and switch the handle type back to aligned, just so it snaps it back into like a straight line there. Otherwise, you could grab that handle, rotate on the Z about 45 degrees, I think. You could hold control and do it, and it should snap it along, but this way works very nicely as well. Tab back into object mode with our Bezier curve still selected. I'm going to hit G, Y, holding control. I'm going to bring it forward 1 click. As you can see, it says 1 meter up here along the global Y. And then I'm going to left click to lock that in. And going back into edit mode, the reason I did that is because you can see here with this handle, right? So we have the 2 handles, one over here, one over here. And then you have these end points of the handles, right? But we're concerned with this center point of the handle, and it is now aligned here at the global along with what our plane axes, or excuse me, not our plane axes, our plane and our torus, they're both of their origin points were there at world center, right? They were both aligned, and that's important. And I've seen it said, I don't know how accurate this part is, but I've seen it said that when you are deforming an object along a curve, that it is also important to have that initial starting point of that curve that you will start your deforming along, that handle point should be also aligned at that same kind of like origin point, supposedly. I don't know, but it works out great here, so it definitely doesn't hurt anything, so that's okay. I'm actually also going to really quickly in edit mode, I'm going to grab this handle and we can just bring it up. You probably shouldn't do this because I'm going to end up undoing this, but just to kind of demonstrate something real quick, I'm going to bring this up on the Z so we get like a little bit of a curve going. Maybe I'll bring it up a little bit higher for an extreme curve. And then I'm going to select our plane torus thing going here. Add modifier, generate array. This part you definitely should do. You just don't have to move that handle there. I'm just doing that for demonstration purposes because I am going to flatten it back out. Then I'm going to change the shape from line to curve. And then select for curve object here, pick our little eyedropper and select the Bezier curve. Also, again, you could also just click this and select the Bezier curve because there's not a whole lot going on in the scene. There should only be the one curve. Ah, darn it, what's going on here, right? No biggie. Go here to align rotation, open that up for forward axis, switch from X to Y. And we can increase the count. Something like 5 looks good for the length of this curve. And you'll notice that, we've got something like this going on, right? Like some of the links are not as like locked in, we got a little bit of this going on. And at this point, it's kind of like in your hands. When you move this over to another blend file where you are going to be building out the profile of this curve and deforming the chain in some kind of smoothed out curvature fashion, it's in your hands. The complexity of that curve, the exact profile of it is going to kind of dictate how you need to approach it and what you need to do. But the reason I moved this up this handle up a bit is so that I can demonstrate a little bit of like a kind of an entry level and idea as to how you might want to go about that. So I'm going to tab into object mode here, and just for this alone, all I got to do is just kind of move this along the Y, and that'll kind of bring that more into you know, where it needs to be, right? That kind of links all that in tighter together. But then we got this going on. Well, you can always just kind of rotate on the X, you know, there you go. Okay, no biggie, right? It's fine. But as you start getting into more like complex curvatures, like let's say we bring it out on the Y over here. Let's bring it down on the Z like so, maybe something like that. Maybe bring it out on the E to extrude and bring it out this way. Rotate on the Z, kind of bring it out like this. I don't know, something weird. And then let's take this, and then we can, of course, increase the count until we get a little something that looks pretty good, pretty linked into each other there. It looks like 12 might be pretty good. So you're going to have to play with a lot of parameters. You're going to have to increase the count, not on the first one. The first array, don't have to touch that anymore. That's just setting up that initial linkage. And then the second array is arraying that linkage. So the two intersecting or like alternating pieces, it's arraying that along the curve, right? So we only need to adjust that second array count. So you have to adjust the array count, and then you have to select your curve and then go in and just kind of, you know, fiddle around with these things. Like, you know, kind of maybe rotate this one a little bit. Also scaling plays a major role in it. And I've seen when working with curves, I've seen it said that less handles is more, and for a lot of things that does tend to be the case. You can actually get some really beautiful, nice, smooth curves with less handles. But in this case, I find that definitely adding some more handles definitely helps if you're trying to get a little bit more of a, you know, like this right here. That's not cool. Now, depending on how far away you're going to be viewing this, right? You might be seeing it from like way over here. It might not matter, right? You always want to take into account the relative viewing distance of that object. So it might not matter, but I don't like it. So what we would do, I don't recommend selecting everything and then right clicking and subdividing. I don't recommend doing that. In a case like this, what I would recommend doing is kind of selecting one handle and then its next handle, right? So that there's no handles in between. There's nothing in here. Select this handle, shift, and select this handle, right click and subdivide, and don't up the count, just leave it at 1. Add one handle at a time. And then if you need to add in another one between here and here, select this one and this one, right click, subdivide, add one handle in between these two, right? And just see what you can kind of get away with just working with these. All right, you can try rotating, because like, oh, see what we're getting in here? See how as I rotate this one, we could also scale it and then try, but it still has a lot of play over this one here. So what I would do is I would select this one, maybe select this one, subdivide, see if it still has as much influence over that one. Not as much. Okay, cool. Select this one, maybe this one, right click, subdivide. Yeah, try to, okay, link that back in like so. Just get it into a little bit more of a believable state, you know? It's kind of, yeah, it's just a song and dance of kind of getting it where you want it to be, right? So, excuse me, I had a coughing fit there. So I'm gonna undo all of that and bring it back to something very simple. So I'm going to bring this back down. I'm going to box select all of it, or I could have just hit A to select everything. And then I'll hit S to scale on the Z, 0, just kind of flatten that out, something like this, right? So now what you would do is we could name these, like that would be a good idea to do. You could rename these. I've seen people rename this plane to like grid. All right, you could do that. The Bezier curve doesn't need to be renamed. Empty doesn't need to be renamed. This torus could be like called chain origin, maybe. Who knows? I don't know. Name it whatever you want. And we could definitely rename the collection though to chain. So at this point, save the blend file, and I highly recommend that you in the very least rename the collection to something recognizable. In this case, chain works perfectly. And do not bother building out some complex curvature here, right? Leave it nice and simple like this. What we've done is we have put together a nice little setup for reusability, versatility, modularity, right? That you can use in various other blend files. So what I'm gonna do is go to File, New, and I'm just gonna go General, and let's pretend that this is some other blend file where I've got some cool stuff going on, where I would like to bring in a chain. I'd like to use a chain. So we'll go a File and Append. Now I don't know how familiar you are with appending, but when we click this, you can't see on my end, so I'm gonna do my best to kind of help navigate through this. I'm using a window capture, so you just can't see it, and I apologize for that. But it should open up your Windows file browser or whatever operating system you're on. So just navigate around that and find wherever your blend files are saved and find that chain blend file that we created and saved. Once you find it and double click it, you're going to see all these other folders like mesh, image, freestyle, line style, such and so forth. Ignore all of those. Double click the one that says collection. And if you did rename the collection in that chain blend file, you should see chain or whatever you named it to. Double click that and it'll automatically append over this collection here, right? So we have the collection, the default collection of the new scene that I'm in, and within it we have our chain collection with the Bezier curve, the empty, the grid plane, and the chain origin child object here. And if we zoom in here, you see we're kind of doubled up here. That's what this is. It's the chain origin piece. By default, when you append over a collection, anything that was hidden in that collection is just unhidden. So anyway, what I'm going to do though is, because a big point of confusion for me when I was first learning a lot of this stuff was that a lot of the videos that I found that covered creating chains would just show what I showed in like the first like 10 or so minutes, and then that's where it like ended. And I was really confused because there's like strict requirements when setting this stuff up, right? Like the original, this chain origin piece in this context, in this case, this method of doing this, the chain and the plane both needed their origin points at the same spot. Not at like world origin, they just needed their origins to be in the same spot. And it just so happens that the most convenient, simplest way of ensuring that they're at the same spot is to just put them at world origin. So really though, it's like in this case you've got the chain origin piece, the grid plane, and the curve, not the curve origin, but the curve again, first handle point, all kind of being relatively in that, you know, starting position, that same, and sharing the same space. And so with that being the case, I was like, well, what are the restrictions or limitations of being able to take this into other places and kind of like mold it into whatever shapes I want? What around that? So I just kind of had to figure it out because nobody really like talked about it, and it was really upsetting. So I'm going to do my best to kind of show that, you know, if you're not familiar, like I can just grab the curve. So that's what I have selected here. I can just move it off over here. I can move it up over here. I can rotate it on the X 90 degrees, right? Let's say I wanted it dangling from like a chandelier or something. It would be even further up, but whatever. Let's say that's what I got going on here, right? And let's say, I don't know, let me just put like, this would not be what you would see on a chandelier, but let me just put like a little bit of a curvature on this sucker. There you go. And let's just say I'm happy with that. Beautiful. Now, if all you're looking to do is still renders, then really you only need to concern yourself with the next like 2 or 3 minutes of this. You can stick around for the rest. I'd love you very much for it, but you don't need to. So if you're just looking to do still renders, like you're just building out scenes, little environments, and you're rendering them in Blender, then really all you need to do is work with this chain origin piece here, because we can grab this and we can shade it smooth, and you'll see that it affects this. We can also, with that still selected, I can hit Control-2 to add a subdivision modifier, and you see, right, smooths everything out a lot more, smooths this out. And it's because this setup, what we've got going on with the instancing, that is we've kind of got like an array on an array on an array. So I could take this chain origin piece, even though it doesn't have an array modifier, it now has a subdivision modifier. I could scale it, right? I can go into edit mode. I can add like a loop cut here, and I can scale that, and you can see over there, it's affecting everything, much like it would if this piece had an array on it, right? But this is what's beautiful and cool about the instancing approach to things, is that you can use the instancing method not just for building out chains, for all manner of things, and you can take the instanced version of it and put it into whatever precarious orientation, and instead of having to fumble with your global, or not global, but with your transform orientations and your transform pivot point to get the proper editing that you want with the, you know, all of that nonsense, you can just put it into whatever precarious situation you want, and then you can, you know, cool, I can just kind of grab this and move it very nice and easily along the Z. No funky stuff, no changing anything. I can do work with the global transforms, and I can do whatever I want. Beautiful, right? Nice and simple. So if you're just looking to do still renders, that's all you really got to do. You can just do everything you need to do to this. You can even slap a material on it, right? For demonstration purposes, let me go into material preview here. I'll do a very simple one. Let's add a new material, and I'll just make it something metallic. Right, something glossy here. You can even change the color, bring this down. Right, something more chain-ish colored. Right, there you go. Cool. And you'll see it also impacts. Let's focus in on that. It also impacts this, right? Beautiful. So let's go back. Let's back that up. Back to where we were. Back to shaded flat. There we go. And so yeah, that's all you'd need to do for a still render, right? But if you're looking to do like a game asset, something to keep in mind is that maybe when you were adding the torus, you might want to like drop the count a little bit lower. Like, so for the major segments, instead of 16, maybe drop it to 8. And for the minor, instead of 8, drop it down to 4. Just because, you know, again, you want to take into account relative viewing distance. And if you're going to be viewing it from really far away, I can't grab this and shade smooth. It doesn't do anything. Not yet right now, but if I grab this and I shade smooth, viewing this thing from even right here, it looks pretty smooth. So viewing it from even further away, it's gonna look pretty stinking smooth. So you could probably get away with doing, you know, something really small. Now I'll cover the, you know, the exceptions to that, I suppose, in just a moment. But anyway, if you did want to do like a game asset, if you wanted to import this over to a game engine, you're gonna get planes. That's what's gonna happen. And there's something you can do in engine to correct that, but I personally just don't like the, oh, I'll fix that in the other software, or I'll fix it later, whatever kind of approach. I don't like to do that. If I can fix it here, I'm going to fix it here. So what we can do is, let's say I'm all super satisfied with what I got going here, right? So I'm going to take the plane, the chain links here, the grid plane, right? And we have all of our arrays. So I'm going to hit right click, and we can go convert to mesh, and that's going to quickly just apply all of our modifiers there. And then we can go into edit mode without it disappearing, but see, we're in edit mode and it just looks like we're still in object mode. Nothing's going on there, right? So then what we need to do is hit Control A in object mode, of course, and down here, make instances real. And then you'll see we'll get these planes back into the mix, but the planes aren't really doing anything. We can just delete those, get rid of those. And at this point, I'll just go ahead and delete the curve. You might want to do whatever kind of duplicating and, you know, to hide it for more non-destructiveness, depending on like the length and complexity of the curve, you know, that you're building. But anyway, now that we've got this, you'll see we have individual little links that we can actually edit. I don't know why it didn't let me edit both of these at the same time. That's kind of weird. I'm not used to seeing that. I think what that is because they are still sharing linked data with this. So if I select this origin piece here and I right click and shade smooth, you'll see it affects these as well. And if I grab these and I hit Control A to apply scale, you'll get this warning. Multiple objects share the same data. Make single user and then apply transforms. You could just hit apply and yeah, no biggie. What you could also do is you could select these, go to object, go to relations, make single user, object and data. That'll do the deal, right? Because if I grab these and I hit Control J, you'll see because of the fact that they're linked up, they're sharing data, that the origin piece down here gets it. Now, I mean, this doesn't matter. We could take this and delete it. It's not going to affect anything, and then that also solves the problem, right? There's many ways to approach this. It doesn't really stinking matter at all. Like, right, I can grab this right now, delete, and then I could grab these and join them together and even after you join them together, when you go to apply scale, it would still give you that warning. But see, now I apply scale, not an issue, no problem, right? So it's just, you know, don't get freaked out when you see that, is more or less what I'm getting at here. But for a game object, yeah, you could do something like that. And then now when you export this over to your game engine, you actually get chains. They're not just the planes anymore. You actually have the real geometry of whatever you built out. And then again, I wouldn't bother with putting on a subdivision modifier unless this is like a hero asset. If you're not familiar with what that is, basically, like, think of like Kratos from God of War, how he's got those chains wrapped around his wrists. Kratos is your main character. He's the focal point of the game. That's something that the player is going to be looking at a lot, all the time. Cutscenes when they're playing. Now back on the PS2, yeah, it pretty much just looked like this, where you still have this faceting, which is where, like, you know, you can still see these sharp kind of points, the apexes, where the vertices are at, you know, where you see the jaggedness of the faces. Now again, when you're zoomed really far out, that's okay, because that's not what we think of in terms of like a hero asset. A hero asset, we're going to be looking at it up close and personal, right? So in the context, yes, of like a hero asset, if this is supposed to be like attached to, like, say, like a lantern that the main character is holding, or something that the player is going to be interacting with or viewing up close often, then yeah, you'd probably want to take this, Control-2, add a subdivision modifier, right? Duplicate, remove that, bake that down so that you can at least fake that geometry to it, rather than actually having, you can fake this high detail down to this, you know? Just something to kind of keep in mind there. But if you're not doing that, if it's not a hero asset, it is just like some chain holding up a chandelier, or a lantern that the player is not holding, just a lantern environmental prop, who cares, dude? This is fine, because again, relative viewing distance, right? And then you do all your usual stuff, but you actually have real true geometry here now that you can work with. So I sat down to edit this, and I realized that one critical piece of information that I did not point out is that specifically for game assets, if you want to not just like slap a material on it, but you want to actually like texture it, I highly recommend that you unwrap the original, right? Slap a seam on the original. Maybe don't do the outside, maybe do like the inside, and then have one vertical. Hey, there you go. One vertical going like that. Mark that. Do that, because as you see, it carries through the whole thing. Whereas if you had made instances real, well, then you're gonna have to go along the entire chain and select all of those edges and mark them, and that's just really annoying. So just something to keep in mind. All right, that's gonna be a wrap on this one. I really hope that it was informative, educational in some capacity. I hope that you were able to walk away from this with some better understanding of how to go about creating some cool stuff for yourself. Please consider leaving a like, subscribe, whatever to help out the channel. Either way, I really appreciate anybody that just sits and watches this stuff. So that's going to be enough out of me. Thank you very much.